Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Good. Whew. So the title of the presentation, Enhance Your Value Through Socializing Your PMO. And specifically, we'll kind of double-click on some of the things that were mentioned in the keynote, which is this notion of, how potentially can you drive further improvement by introducing Yammer in the PPM world, whether it's PWA or on a project team site. Now, before we start, I do have a couple questions. How many of you are actually using Yammer today? Wow, I'm impressed.
Wow.
You guys are going to be a tough crowd. And how many of you came because of Andrew? That's this guy.
Right.
Okay.
More than we expected, but yeah.
Okay. We'll get there. Thanks. Next slide.
Oh.
And then we switch.
It's all good. We obviously have rehearsed this to the nth degree. So the question we will attempt to answer in this presentation, thank you all for coming. We tried to wait for you, sorry. But the question we're trying to answer in this presentation is really, what do you need to become to use Yammer effectively? All right. And that goes back to an ancient question about technology. What do you have to become to use different forms of technology effectively? For example, when we started moving to laptops, we had to learn how to interface with the laptop using a keyboard and a mouse. Then suddenly the tablet came in, and suddenly we have to interface and consume information and understand how to use gestures like pinches and tapping on the screen, etc. Twitter came in, and we suddenly had to learn how to express ourselves in 140 characters or less. So every time these new waves of technology come out, they affect us, and they affect how we interact with that technology. If you ever have done coding, you have to start thinking with the same logic as the code. When we talk about Yammer, and when we talk about using Yammer and other collaborative tools effectively, the real question is, what do we have to become to use those tools effectively? So today, to guide you through this journey, we've got Christoph.
Thank you, Andrew. So Christoph Eisinger, for those of you that are new to the conference, I used to be on the project world. And about a year ago, I transitioned to, I'm still in the office marketing team in beautiful Redmond, but I focus on this topic of enterprise social. And you'll see that, well, we are talking definitely about Yammer, but you'll see that this topic of enterprise social is not just about @mentioning and using hashtag. It spans, whether we're using more near real-time communications, such as Link or Skype, or things such as email and obviously document collaboration. So I'll touch on that. And then you're probably wondering, where is this picture taken? Last summer, I was training for a 50 miles. Yeah, that's 80 kilometers for those European in the crowd. And I was training for a race, and this is Mount Rainier in beautiful Washington. Andrew.
Awesome. All right, my name is Andrew Levinsky. I am with UMT. I think you have all, at this point, probably heard of UMT and seen our booth. We're trying to make this, of course, the UMT conference sponsored by Microsoft. We haven't quite achieved that goal, but maybe next conference we'll get there. As you can see, I do tweets, and I've got a blog. I know a number of you have read that blog. We'll actually have a post coming out on this topic coming out in about the next hour or so. Feel free to visit the blog. I'm based in beautiful Houston, Texas, where it's much warmer than I think most of this country at this point, including Anaheim. And that's pretty much it. I'm also an MVP, one of the few MVPs in North America, and I've been an MVP, luckily, for the last, I think, 4 years or so. So let's get into the topic, or the main point of the presentation here. Let's start talking about Yammer and socializing your PMO and PM 2.0. Has anyone heard that term, PM 2.0? It's going to be the next big thing. It's awesome, man. PM 2.0 is all about collaboration. It's all about empowering our users. And I'm not trying to mock that. I think that's a great thing, right? I think it's all about having empowered project teams. On the other hand, it's also important to have schedules, let's face it. I would love to live in a world without schedules. I would love to live in a world where I didn't have to provide estimates to my stakeholders, but I don't. So I need to balance out that mix of structure and unstructured work. And it's kind of like Jared was talking about this morning, that we're kind of expanding the world of work management at the project conference to include that soft collaboration as well as the harder structure and modeling and simulations that Project Server provides. So anyways, people have been talking about PM 2.0 for a while, and it's always an ongoing debate. You know, the merits of PM 2.0 versus PM 1.0, structured or project management with hard rigor versus unstructured project management. And really, from what I can tell, it's the same thing. They're just spectrums of management, if you will. How many of you have gone and gotten your PMP certification? All right, so quite a few in the room. So we've got a bunch of certified pimps in the room. Good. And when you get your PMP certification, they like to talk about team building, right? And the steps of team building. And anyone remember what are the 4 or 5, depending on where you learn this, steps in forming a team? Just shout it out. What's the first one? Yeah, we skipped forming. We went straight to storming over here, which is fine. So forming, storming, norming, and performing, right? Now, what are those? You know, typically when you talk about the phases of team development, you know, what does that mean, forming, storming, norming, and performing? The way I like to see it, it's all about developing a common culture and a common sense of shared purpose. Let's talk about that term. Let's talk about culture for a second. You know, what is culture? Culture is a set of rules that govern how I interact with the world. So I come to my project with my own culture. That might be a function of where I grew up, might be a function of my family structure, my religion, a whole slew of different things. And what happens when you get a bunch of people together is they develop their own unique culture. So I think we all see in large companies, they create these silos, these business units. Every business unit ends up having its own unique culture. Now, what happens when we form a team is we get a number of people who all come from different cultures, who all react to the world differently. We throw them in a room together. We say, work together. First question, of course, is towards what? Can we achieve a shared common goal? And in the first stage, forming, we may not even have consensus as to what our shared goals are. We might agree what the goals are, but not everyone understands or has the same understanding of what those goals are. When you move to the next stage, storming, at that point we kind of have consensus as to what the goals are, but our cultures are still clashing. And you could substitute pretty much every cliche team movie you've ever seen, like Hoosiers or, you know, Dirty Dozen or anything. But basically, you get a bunch of different people from different backgrounds who want to react to the world differently, throw them all into a room together, and they start clashing about how to best achieve their goals. Why? Because their culture is their identity. That is how they respond to the world. And sometimes that's more important than the actual goal they're trying to accomplish. Moving on, then we get to norming, right? Norming is that stage where we all agree on goals. We more or less agree on how to get there, but we still can cause conflict between different approaches on how to achieve those goals. To get past the norming stage, you have to have clear roles. You have to say, look, you, Tony, you're doing this stuff, and if you have any question for Chris, you're over here, and we dictate what your roles are, and we try to mitigate or minimize the conflict between you two. Okay? That's norming. When you get past norming, you end up in performing, and there's actually another stage a lot of people talk about called high performing. But performing is where Chris and Tony agree this is what we want to accomplish, and whether or not they have different ways of accomplishing that, they're willing to give in. They're willing to concede. For Tony to say, hey, Chris, you're closest to this problem. You know how best to achieve this or to solve this, so I'm going to step back and listen to you for leadership. And what happens in a performing team is whoever's closest to the problem becomes the leader, right? Great. Now, in a high-performing team, we all agree on what the goals are, or we can also start saying, hey, look, the goals fall within certain boundaries. And I'm going to be very vague here, and that's fine. We're going to get into the actual Yammer part of the presentation pretty soon. Once we identify those boundaries, we leave it up to the team how to achieve those goals. Why? Because again, they're driven by achieving those goals, or they should be. This is what's called intrinsic motivation. The team desires to achieve those goals. That's as opposed to extrinsic motivation, which means I do things because my boss sees that I'm doing it and I have to do it because he told me I have to do it. Right? So intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. And when you go through this model, what you find is in a high-performing team, you've got very clear goals. We want to achieve this, but we have fuzzy roles. We're not really defining the exact division between the different resources and how they achieve the goals. We leave that up to the resources. They can sort themselves out. They can figure out how to best achieve those goals. In that model, we move from a command and control model, which is kind of your traditional project management model, and we move towards one of collaboration, right? This is what PM 2.0 talks about. Now, the thing is, this is nothing new. And people have been talking about this for a long time. They've been talking about this in the context of organizations, right? So for this presentation, when we talk about building a collaborative culture, I know that the title is that we're building a collaborative culture around the PMO. The reality is, The reality is we're building a collaborative culture around the different groups, the different organizations within an overall company where they have common goals. That could be a project team, that could be, what do we got? A technical team, a PMO group, the organization overall. What we're talking about today applies at all levels of that organization. It really depends on what level we're talking at when we look at how to best achieve collaborative culture. So anyways, this is nothing new. What you'll see if you start going into the literature is there are books upon books upon books that have been written about this. Some of those books, dating back 30, 40, 50, 60 years even. The beauty of that is, of course, if you want to go and read more about how to build collaborative culture, it's relatively cheap. You can go on Amazon and pick up most books for under $4, which is a great deal. Awesome. Okay, why are we talking about that now? Well, there's a bunch of converging trends, and this is kind of what Jared was talking about this morning. We've got some converging trends. One, we've got the availability of software, collaboration software, collaboration in the cloud that supports this sort of way of working. The second trend is that we've got more remote workers. More and more remote workers, more and more companies deciding they don't need an office, and they're going to allow remote workers, which means now I no longer have a manager sitting over me, watching me, making sure I'm working, but we need intrinsically motivated staff to make remote working work. So suddenly, we now care about people being intrinsically motivated. We probably have always cared about it, but we care more about it, right? And the third trend is that we've got a generational transition, that we've got more younger people coming into the workforce who are coming from an intrinsically motivated perspective, perhaps, who want the freedom of working remote. And that's driving a lot of change in the workforce. You throw all those trends together, and what you get is a conclusion that we're serious about building self-organized collaborative teams. But this time, we actually mean it, right? Because we've been talking about this stuff for 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, it goes back a ways. So before we get into Yammer, just a quick note. I know everyone always says, what's Yammer? And I know I'm guilty of this. We always say, what's the answer? What is Yammer? Anyone know the quote? There we are. It's Facebook for the enterprise, right? It's not quite Facebook for the enterprise. When I look at Yammer adoption in an organization, the Facebook stage is stage one. And what I mean by that is Facebook is a social tool. You use Facebook to share your experiences. Hey, I just went to this great hockey game. It was awesome, right? This is my daughter's birthday parties pictures. I'll throw those up on Facebook. And everyone, when they start using Yammer in a company, that's immediately the model they start gravitating towards, right? We just had our company ski trip 2 weeks ago. Here's all the great photos. Hey, someone just scored this great sale. Let's post it on the Windwire, right? That's sharing an experience. But true collaboration, when you actually achieve it, is about building shared experiences. That we're actually identifying problems and solving problems via the collaboration tool, right? That's the difference. So I'm going to kick it over to Christoph here.
Thank you, Andrew. By the way, we got plenty of seats up front. You guys want to sit down? Yammer and how does that fit in? And yes, we will just jump into demo shortly. So again, hopefully you've all attended the keynote. And again, okay. So you've all attended the keynote, and how does that fit into the picture? You heard, obviously we've started historically in the project management space with a beautiful project desktop client. And then, we've grew into portfolio management with the UMT acquisitions a couple years ago. And then, as we mentioned, we were looking at the broad spectrum with some of the things we did recently with the 2013 release around work management. So we're really about covering the entire suite. I mean, another way to think about it that we talk about, especially in the social space, it's all about connecting every node in your organization. Yes, you get the PMO, whether that's 20 people, 50 people, 1,000 people. But how about the other 99% of employees in your companies? How about the folks in finance? How about the folks in HR? How about folks in R&D? How about folks in IT? Ideally, the value of the network increases as you connect more and more nodes. So that's what you'll see, how that layer, that typically what we say is social, should not be a destination per se. And if you're living and breathing in PWA all day long, you shouldn't go to another destination to see what best practice Andrew shared attending project conference this week. So specifically, when we talk about enterprise social, typically there's a lot of myth that I hear from customers or sometimes from partners is, okay, social, personally, typically people associate that with very personal experience with Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, if you get kids, Vines, whatever is the latest things. And there is actually real value, and typically based on all the customers that we get using this, including all of you hopefully in the audience are using Yammer, we kind of put the value into 3 buckets. Now, this is not exhaustive, but this is how we talk about what social can do for you. And the first one is we talk about engagement. And this is extremely important and extremely also important in the PMO world, which is all about, how do we make sure that Andrew doesn't just go in once a week to do his timesheets, but maybe he checks in on a regular basis. Maybe he shares insights of something not working well on a particular task or a particular assignment he's got to do this week. How do we bring Andrew back, not just, again, in that beautiful interface to do his timesheet, but throughout the entire week between all those time intervals? And how about if Andrew is not in front of a PC? How about if Andrew doesn't even have a PC because maybe he's in manufacturing or he's in sales, whatever? So that's what we mean by engagement. Make sure that everyone's voice is heard regardless of hierarchies, regardless of location, and regardless of what device they get in their hand at that moment in time. Collaborate, hopefully I'm preaching to the choir, but we think there's tremendous value to really help you working on a project and getting alignment. I'm not going to repeat all the stuff that Andrew was doing to frame the discussions, but we think, again, greasing the wheels, making sure everyone's aligned in terms of communications, making sure we can pull people maybe outside of the teams to make sure they're aware of either something we're about, phase we're about to reach in a particular project or something that's not going well, and you'll see we'll demo a little bit of that later on. And then last but not least, social. Typically, because you can get alignment with everyone in your company, whether it's the new intern with minimum wage to the CEO and everyone in between, potentially at the end of the day, you can drive efficiency. Now, whether innovation is about launching a new product, whether innovation is about driving efficiency in an existing product, existing process, or both, it's all of the above. We get customers typically in pretty much every industry, from government to mining, manufacturing, oil and gas, and on every region of the world. And sometimes innovation can be a slight improvement into a manufacturing process. At the end of the day, you innovate a little bit, you improve something. That's what keeps you on top of your game, whatever industries you're playing in. And you obviously know that the world is becoming fiercer and fiercer out there, and typically the pitch is, typically our customers can get information faster on the outside than us on the inside, right? I can just ask, hey, Andrew, what do you think of this new product via Facebook, Twitter, all of the above, and probably if I was working for a company, it'll probably take me longer to get the same opinion, whether that's a valid or non-valid opinion, right? So that's what's happening. That's just a reality. So how do you, if your customers organize a network, whether it's loosely organized or structured networks, how do you on the inside make sure your cells work like a network with clear goals, whatever you're doing? Okay, enough talking. So let's do the first demo. Actually, there's 2 demos. okay? So there's two sections to this demo. I'll do a little bit of what we call Yammer 101, and I apologize for all of you that have raised your hand that are using Yammer today. And then the next part of the demo, which is, okay, how does that fit in my day-to-day circadian rhythm that I'm doing, whether it's in Project Web App or whether it's a specific project team site that we're working on. So for those of you that have never seen Yammer, this is what this is the standard, well, I've customized it, but this is the Yammer, and you'll see it's got a little different, oops, slow down. So this is the Yammer user interface, and a couple things that I'll bring to your attention is on the left-hand side, we get this notion of what we call groups. And a group could be many things in the Yammer world. It could be a structured group for a specific project, or a program, or portfolio. It could also be a community of practice. Let's have a community of practice around PPM. Let's have a community of practice around PMP certified individuals. Let's have a community around whoever is our biggest competitor, so we make sure we all constantly learn what's happening on the outside world. Or it could also be a group, could be on a physical team, right? So for instance, personally at Microsoft, we got a group for a team, and then I belong to multiple groups, whether it's groups around product launches or cross-group across Microsoft. So that's what you get on the left-hand side. On the main part of the screen, that's what we call your main newsfeed. And you can drive analogies to personal things, maybe your Facebook or LinkedIn, and you can really control what information you see there. And a lot of people typically, when it's the first time they're using Yammer, say, it's a fire hose. I can't control the amount of information. You can actually absolutely control that amount of information because you can narrow it down to only give me updates to either people that I'm following or projects that I belong to, or groups that I belong to, or topics that are of interest to me. So you can really narrow it down and filter the noise so that it's really relevant to you and it's not just the fire hose of everything happening at your company. So that's the main news feed. One thing you're seeing here, for instance, is one of the Yammer capabilities, which is the ability to broadcast an announcement. The beauty here of an announcement is it puts it at the top of your user interface. You don't miss a beat. And until you click on it, then it won't go away. So again, that's one way to really put something like a key milestones, or here's when the company picnic is, here's the shareholder meeting, or whatever is deemed important for your organization. On the right-hand side is information about the network. So the Yammer user interface is constantly learning about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So for instance, the groups you see on the left, based on how much activity, on how much participation, those are automatically, the order is automatically changed. You don't control it per se as a user, but as Yammer learns where you're spending your time, it'll prioritize the groups and communities that you spent most of your time in. On the right-hand side are activities from the members you're following. Where this gets interested, and I wasn't planning to do a deep dive onto that, is think of pretty much like in the PPM world, ideally your PMO, your PPM is not a siloed app. You're going to have to connect it up front maybe to your HR system to get resource information. Maybe downstream you're going to have to push data to your ERP to do accounting, chargeback, whatever you're doing. And it's the same thing with this, that potentially you can get signals or push signals to your favorite sales automation application, to your favorite ticketing application, to your favorite ERP application, to whatever third-party app. So that's what you're seeing here. Here we didn't connect it, but here you can see activities, not only of activities within this network, but potentially, again, if I had hooked it up for, let's say, Microsoft Dynamics CRM, I would see activities for my sales organizations if I'm following specific deals. On the right-hand side, just going a little lower, you can see that, again, the system is learning what I'm doing on a regular basis. And based on my connections and who I'm following and who I participate, it starts suggesting people. So again, this is a demo environment. It only has 30 fictitious characters. But you can only imagine if you get a couple hundred, thousands, or even us at Microsoft where it's like 130,000, sometimes you do make interesting discoveries of folks you didn't know just because physically you're not in the same building, but potentially someone that could really help you on a deliverable, someone that could really have, I don't know, thought leadership on whatever topic you care about. And it's also doing the same thing on suggested groups. So again, remember, a group could be a physical team, but it could also be a community of interest within your organization. So the systems is commonly based on the pattern, on what everyone's doing in the network. It starts suggesting things that might be of interest based on what you do every day. So that's the standard user interface for Yammer. And let's look now specifically into a group. So now I went to a group, and for this demo, we created the PMO group. So think of the community of practice for our project management office that we set up for our organization. We're striving to go up in terms of maturity. And so we want everyone, whether they're practitioners or whether they're just certified, whatever, to start sharing IDs. So in a group, you can see that a couple things. Similarly to in the main news feed, you do have this time, it's all the conversations and the activities scope for that community. Now the concept in Yammer is, by default, when you create a group, it's open. And that's one of the key things that typically differentiates this type of communication to, let's say, a distribution list in email or a SharePoint site. By default, it's open. All right? When you create a team site in SharePoint, unless you put everyone, by default, it's scoped to a team or whatever group you pull down from the master list or whatever you put manually. So the idea here is, if I create a group, I'll come back to that. Let me go back. So I could browse groups, and I can, I'll watch what Andrew's saying. So I can create a group. I'll get back to external group, but I can say, PC14 demo, and notice that by default it's open, and I can put a description, and that's it. Voila. I've created a group, and it takes a couple seconds, and I only have, right now I'm the admin of this group, and there's no one else. But it's as simple as that. Now, yes, you can secure that group. If it's the hush-hush group, you can make it private. You can make it private invite only, and you can make it private invite only and also hidden from the rest of the network. So if you're working on an acquisition or something extremely mission sensitive, you can totally hide this collaboration space from everyone else in your network. So let's go back to Andrew. It sounds like I missed. What do you think of the mustache? Oof. I don't know if I should answer that. So you see, I'm constantly getting the information. Oh yeah, the other thing, so I was talking about the group. I get the newsfeed about the group. On the right-hand side, the members that are part of this group. Again, typically, I know it's personally how I use it at Microsoft, but it's always interesting to make discoveries of who are participating in the group. It's very easy to just say, maybe, let's pick Robin. Maybe Robin is putting a lot of valuable insights on, I don't know, PMO best practices or whatever. And very easily, I can add Robin to the set of people that I'm following. I can also go to Robin and say, before I actually follow Robin, maybe I want to find additional information on what is her activities. Here she can put a lot of information, but pretty much like you would expect, I can put my educations, I can put my career experience, my expertise, beautiful picture of myself, but more importantly, me as an individual, I can see what Robin is spending her time with. So I can just do one click, and suddenly everything that Robin's going to do in that network is going to appear in my newsfeed. So going back to the group, there's different ways to interact in Yammer. There's different objects. So yes, you can do a conversation, and I can reply it. Let's skip this one. So I can reply to Andrew, as you can see, loving it, and it's, what you would expect. You can start a couple things. You can start bringing people to the conversation, and maybe, I can start typing automatically. I'm going to bring it, Sarah, for an opinion, or I could just be a little more passive, and I can say, let's notify a manager or someone who cares about that. So I start typing, and like you would expect, when you have that back and forth conversation, I can start using tags. So I can say, go Seahawks. I know I'm mixing conversation here. But I can start tagging. Oops. Here we go. So I can start adding topics. The idea here is, as you start gathering lots and lots of conversation, potentially you're gonna put a hashtag, maybe a compete or a best practice, so that potentially folks that are following that topic, maybe PMP certification, maybe there's a dedicated group for a PMP certified individual like Contoso, in addition to our PMO best practices, and this would be one way to start following conversations that are happening across those different groups in my organizations. Goosey hooks, yeah, okay. I had too much coffee today. Okay, so I've talked about, so I've showed you little basic conversations. The other things you can do, at least at the basic level, yes, you can have files in Yammer, and you can have files, whatever file type, whether it's a beautiful Office document, in this case I got a PowerPoint, but I can put a JPEG, I can put a video, and that's actually a lot of our customers, especially around a best practice or a community of practice, they put a lot of best practice internally in this form. And then once I put a document, in this case, we'll open this slide, again, I can have a conversation around this topic at the bottom of the document. So it's not so much, hey, look at this document, but what do you think? And I'll show you later on how this transpires in, let's say, day-to-day project management activities. So anything you put in Yammer, you can have a conversation on that object, whether it's a picture, a file, a video. So I've talked about files going back. And then the last piece is what we call notes. And actually, I haven't created, you'll see later on, I've created a couple notes in the project that we're going to be collaborating on. But again, think of notes, something very similar to the OneNote we got today in Team Sites. And you might say, Christoph, you got OneNote, and you showed it to us this morning, and you got a note-taking app in Yammer. What's the convergence? And we're definitely looking at converging and picking the best experience. But at least today, it's very easy to start. Independent of SharePoint, I can easily start typing a note and saving that. And I'm saying, really can't type today. Hello world, and voila. And yes, you can track revisions, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be one, let's say, easy way if we want to do ideations with a team on a specific topic. So that's number 101. Let me switch gears now to making sure I haven't forgot anything. Oh yeah, sorry, one more thing before I move on to project collaboration is, as I mentioned, here's two things I want to show you. So you're seeing at the top here, we got this concept of inbox that hopefully you're all familiar with, especially for all the email users out there, and I'm sure we're all very familiar with that. So here, the way this works is any conversation, either that I'm following proactively, like a topic, or any conversation where either I've been copied or @mentioned will appear in this list. So here, Andrew clearly @mentioned Christoph, or he replied to one of my topics, so that's why it appears in my inbox. And then, I can read this or unread, and I go back there, and suddenly my inbox is decremented, and it looks like Andrew is really going at it. So you see another message appear here, and I can like this message, and voila. This next button in Yammer is what we call notification. The idea of notification is if, for instance, Andrew liked one of my reply, anytime someone starts following an activity, starts maybe modifying something to a group I have added, would appear there. So it's something, it doesn't necessarily need my attention, but it's more of an FYI. Someone liked your announcement, someone liked your mustache, someone liked Andrew's goofing off, that would appear in notifications. So that's the difference between inbox and notification. Okay, let's switch gears. So that's the Yammer 101. Let's switch gear now to how does that fit with Project Web App. So here you've got PWA, and hopefully you're familiar with that. And what I've done is I've integrated, or I'm surfacing Yammer conversation within my Project Web Apps homepage. Now you might be asking, hey, Christoph, you're demoing this online, does it work on-prem? Absolutely. Yammer has been integrated with SharePoint since 2007, 2010, and obviously now we're on 2013. So in 2013, it's a lot easier because it's using the new app model, so you can literally go to the store, it's free, you get the app, and you say, okay, in this case, this is my PMO community of practice, so let's put it on the homepage. So everyone that has PW as their homepage, they'll see the latest and the greatest happening with respect to this beautiful and vibrant community of practitioners that I've got at Contoso. So that's at the high level, and again, I can interact. If this is my home page, I don't need to go to Yammer to start saying, to write some questions, did anyone attend? We'll do ProjConf 2014, right? So I don't need to leave that interface. And, my peers, that message is broadcast to the community, and anyone that's part of the PMO will see that message. So that's the bringing Yammer as a community of practice in my project web app. Where this gets interesting is, obviously, you're collaborating, hopefully, on a project or portfolio or work package, whatever that granularity. So here we've created a single project. And I'm just going to navigate to this to the team site. And voila, and so you got a team site. I got to bring your attention to this beautiful timeline view that I did. Okay, hang on. Okay, voila. So it's the perfect to actually bing it. What are the official RGB colors for the Seahawks? I got to say, Ludo only saw 2 games in his entire life here in the U.S. I've seen a couple more games, so I'm a little ahead of him. But anyway, so I got a team site, I got a timeline, all the things you can do with 2013 or with Project Online. And in this case, I've just did a little bit of a branding and customization on this site. Let me just collapse here so you get more real estate. So here I say, let's have the timeline at the top and top of mind so there's clear alignment. What are the next big things we're working on? And then here on the right-hand side, I get my document library, but it could be a list of issues, a list of risks, whatever you can do with SharePoint. And voila, again, the same app, except in this case, when you get that app from our App Store, I've scoped it to a specific group. So you can see all the messages here are for this project called TDF. And so let's navigate. So here, same thing. I can see it's a lot more focused. It's anything related to that specific project. So let's actually go to this project. So Project TDF, you might be asking, what's TDF? And actually, Andrew and I were not very creative, but one of the prep, it stands for Tour de France, because this Contoso bike is a bicycle company. And you've seen a little bias there. I put beautiful pictures of a Windows Phone and an iPhone squeezed in between 2 Windows phones. But anyway, so here I've got a little more thing specific to this project. Again, it's open for everyone in the organizations. And you can see here, now we've started collaborating on specific deliverables. Now, a couple things we can do that I didn't mention earlier is Yammer has this notion of praises, which I'll get back to later. But for instance, in this case, one of our colleagues, Garth, praised our colleague Molly for a great compete deck that she delivered to our team. So again, it's the ability to really reward folks for great work they've done. Another great capabilities of Yammer that people use quite a bit is the ability to create a survey. So you can see here, I say, what's your preference for our first TDF offsite? And I put 3 great cities, Paris, Seattle, and Sydney. It looks like half and half. No one wants to go to Australia. That's a shame. Beautiful place to visit. But it's as easy as doing a click. I go here and I create a poll. Anyone going to the attendee party?
But Christoph, I'm a bit confused. Because this morning, I saw the same survey in SharePoint.
You're absolutely right. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's definitely a duplicate today. And, stepping back in history, Yammer is an acquisition we did 18 months ago. And so there's definitely overlap in some functionalities. And, I'm not going to disclose any roadmap today. We'll be providing more information in about a month at SharePoint conference. And I know not everyone's going to get to go, but just look at the news and you get the update. But there's definitely that idea where we're converging on picking the best of what we got today. So yes, you can do a survey using SharePoint. And SharePoint surveys are great, and this is just another way of doing it. Typically, the one argument I would put for a Yammer survey versus a SharePoint survey, is this is very easy to start, right? I don't need permissions. And if it's something like, hey, who's coming to the picnic, or something very not mission critical, it's like in 2 clicks I've got it, I can get feedback, and then we can move on. So I'm not saying this is better. I'm saying potentially it's a different use case than a very stricter SharePoint survey. But there's definitely some overlap in terms of questions on gathering feedback from peers. Does that answer the question, Andrew?
I think so.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, so surveys, same thing. I put a little more documents here. Typically the way I use it, at least at Microsoft, is I always link back to the SharePoint team site. And so here, for instance, I get a link, right? I can always get back to my feed if I want to look at more from a document-centric, or if I want to get that beautiful timeline view with the Seahawks colors. And in this case, same thing. I put some documents, and I did put some notes in this one, so I can show it to you. And here we get the script of our conference demo. Actually, let me step back. I put some document in here and a demo. Yammer has this very easy mechanism to force things to be official record or official piece of knowledge. Yammer has this ability to mark something as official. And mark something as official is as easy as 1 click. So here I get just lorem ipsum text, so I'm bother reading. But with 1 click, I can just flag that item. What happens from there going forward is every time my peers are looking for something, you can see that little yellow star here. This type of asset, if I search for compete, is going to be typically surfaced at the top. Because suddenly this is an official piece of knowledge or an official document. Now it also puts a lock on that document. So if I declare this as the official compete deep dive, only myself can modify it, or only someone who's an administrator of that group. So again, we're narrowing down something that becomes official, and we don't want it to be constantly a moving target, and we scope it down pretty much like you can do in SharePoint. You can put, some folks have only viewing access, and some folks do have edit capabilities. So that's what mark as official means. Now that's great to capture conversation. How does that fit in with the SharePoint capabilities, especially around content management? So let me go back to something we've enabled last fall, which is the ability to start a conversation on any document. So here I went back to our team site, and you can see here I've got different documents in my document library. And on any document, you've seen kind of that in the demo, but I'll pause a little more. So the first thing we did in 2013, we'll give you rich visualizations. So it's very easy to say, oh yeah, is this the document I'm looking for, right? So that's powered by the Office web app. And yes, I can do that across browser. It doesn't have to be a beautiful IE. And sharing mechanism, again, like we discussed this morning, I can share this on the inside, but more importantly, I can share this on the outside. And I think this is a very common scenario where, especially in the project management world, you are going to bring contractors, some experts for very pointed tasks or deliverables that are not part of your organizations, but yet you only want to keep one version of the truth on that particular deliverable. And that's what this enables, whether it's on the inside or the outside. If I do a share, that document never leaves that document library. It just gives access to that person, whether it's someone within my organizations or someone on the outside. So again, a very huge gain in productivity where we're not passing a document around and you're going to be spending more time downstream merging all the changes. It never left wherever it is. On the contrary, you're bringing people to the conversation, but there's always one source of truth at any point in time. And that's the same thing with this third action, which is post. The idea is, and what we're seeing customers do, it's great to do a beautiful deliverable, et cetera, et cetera. And here I'm going to make Andrew work a little bit. Please review yesterday. Sounds familiar, right? And then I can put a message. Yes, I can. Let's put Andrew's boss, pretend it's Garth, so he's got extra pressure. And here I'm going to scope it to a specific group. I could have posted this to to our entire organizations. I can put additional tag, et cetera, et cetera. So what this does is you can see here I've started a conversation. I can show it to you here also in a Yammer, right? The document I just put in is right there. The idea here is, back to what I was saying, yes, it's great to have a beautiful deliverable. In this case, it looks like some research document. But what's more important is, what was the consensus on that document? And whether it's a beautiful presentation, whether it's a budget, where you're working on a budget proposal for the next fiscal, let's say you're in IT, and what did you ask last year to the CEO? Did you say 5% increase on your ERP maintenance cost? Did you ask for an extra budget to go to the cloud? Yada, yada, yada. And you're capturing that conversation. And if I show it to you, as soon as I create that conversation, it creates what we call an object, an open graph object. And from there on, I got one conversation for that document. I don't have fragmentation, so I can always go back and say, what did we all agree, or what did we all disagree on for that deliverable? So again, think of the better together. Yes, you can do co-authoring and you can track updates on a document. But now, in addition to that, you can have a consensus or disagreements or an open discussions of what should you do to have this beautiful deliverable? What's the consensus on this budget ask? It looks like Andrew is really going at it. Am I missing a joke?
Never.
So again, think of better together. The document never left SharePoint. Conversation powered by Yammer. Okay? So I'll pause from the demo, and now we're going to switch to a couple more slides, and then we'll do a little more demos.
And the beauty of co-presenting is that one of the presenters gets to ignore the timing and exactly how he rehearsed it and just jump in and totally mess up the other presenter's timing. So one thing I would want to point out while you're going back to the slides is that one of the powerful features, I guess, of Yammer is you saw how he just added that web part to a project team site. But you can add that web part to pretty much any application. So if you're using Dynamics or CRM or some sort of help desk system, you can actually add Yammer to a lot of those interfaces. And then what you've got is a built-in single discussion interface that actually supports all those different applications. So I can actually have an application-based discussion group that maybe the project team subscribes to if they're doing an upgrade, let's say, to SAP or something like that. You can create groups all around all sorts of different topics. Is a question? Yes, sir. All right, I'll repeat the question, and then Christoph will probably
So the question is, can you automate group creation? And absolutely. There's actually next month at the SharePoint conference, there's a customer nationwide, which is in the insurance business. And any user in their intranet, when they go create a team site, and to really control proliferation of team sites or just sites in general, they check, does it already exist, and is there already potentially a matching group? So Christoph wants to create a team site called PPM or PMO. Hey, Christoph, there's already a PMO Center of Excellence. Maybe you don't need a net new one. Maybe you need a new site, but already mapped to that group. Or maybe you need a new of each because this is really a new initiative. So create a site, create a group. So you can automate it today using the standard API extensibility that Yammer has. So there's that customer nationwide has done all that, and we're talking about some of those things. So yes, you can automate the one-to-one, but one thing to think about is sometimes it's not a one-to-one. Similar, I remember in the project world, it was the same discussion. Do I need a team site for every project? Maybe not. And it's that same dilemma here. Do you need a group do you need a Yammer group for every project? And maybe not. If projects roll up to work package or programs, whatever you've done, the work breakdown, you might not need at the very granular level. So yes, you can automate it. Yes, at the back. It never left SharePoint. Okay, so the question is, how many versions, and then how do you manage revisions on access rights? Let me try to answer all these. So the document, in this case, never left that document library, whether it's governed by a workflow, whatever I'm doing on that document library, or in this case, it's just vanilla document library for that team site. So if that team site's group members are only Andrew and myself, and I share it with you, I share it with Molly, and I say, hey, everyone, can you review this? They're going to click on the link, and they're going to say, sorry, you haven't been granted permission to that document. Yeah. No, again, let's look at that message. Again, let's be very clear. The document never left SharePoint. Yeah. I like the way you think. So think of this document as an object. In this case, it's a document, because we love document at Microsoft. But it could be, back to what you're saying, it could be a ticket. It could be a financial record. Whatever is that third party, or it's a document, what we did when we started that conversation is that object stays where it is, in this case, SharePoint, or it could be, again, a internal order or work items. It could be a sales opportunity in your CRM. It could be a ticket in your ticketing, whatever. That never left that system of record, driven by that business process, whatever you got. What you did in Yammer is create what we call a link to that initial object, whatever it is, and then from there on, you're going to capture the conversation. So again, in this case, the document never left that system of record, that whether it's just the two of us accessing. Now, whether we do versionings, whatever we do with SharePoint, this is just standard SharePoint. But all the conversations from there on are captured there. Again, to reiterate, if it was just Andrew and I that have access to that team site, my colleagues on that TDF site, or anyone at Contoso, because it's open by default, will see the conversation we're having back and forth. But every time they click on the link, again, if you look at the URL, I click on the link, it's pointing to SharePoint. So if I didn't have access to that document, I'll say, please request access. Yes. So I'm glad you like it. Some of the things we're working on is, here I'm looking at the documents. And again, remember I told you we think social should not be a destination. If I'm a project manager and I've reached the end of phase 1, and I'm getting ready to present that to the head of the R&D or to my CIO or whoever it is, to marketing, to say, hey, we're about to ship this product. You better have your launch campaign. Potentially, we're going to bring conversation back to here. So I shouldn't have to go to Yammer to see what all my peers said about this feedback. I should have it side by side. And so that's some of the things we've showed. That, again, it's a better together. We know SharePoint is very good at content management, wherever it's got driven by a workflow, obviously beautiful rendering using the web app. So we're bringing conversation. We're augmenting the way you deliver, in this case, a document by adding that conversation layer. And again, I'm showing a document, but it could be a PDF, a JPEG, whatever is that deliverable. Hey, we're looking at this new product logo for our product launch. What does everyone think? Right? You can do that. Hey, as long as it's in a SharePoint document library, you can start a conversation with that post action that I showed you. Okay, we still have quite a bit to talk, and I'm seeing people leave. So I definitely want to move on slide-wise. And we will be around at the end. So I just want to make sure we cover all the things we wanted to talk about. So we've given you the glimpse of how potentially you can collaborate and communicate. And the question is, how do you realize value? And I do want to show you one video, and I picked the one that would definitely stretch, that would be as different from your world as possible. So let me see, a little hard. Here we go. It's a 2-minute video.
in the Great Recession, many best-in-class competitors made decisions around efficiency and effectiveness that helped them preserve their margins. Well, Red Robin hadn't done any of that. And from my experience, I realized that there were a lot of efficiencies to be had if we only unleashed the power of our team members to help us.
Our CFO offered to write a $1,000 check out of his own pocket for the best cost savings idea that we could come up with, but he had two rules around those cost savings. The first is it couldn't negatively impact a guest or a team member, and second is it had to be sustainable. It couldn't be a one-hit wonder.
Well, historically, if you wanted to get ideas from the front line, you went out and you talked to people, and I did that. But with Yammer, you're able to put a challenge out to 25,000 people at the same time.
And what he did is he got on stage and he launched this at our annual leadership conference, but then engaged this contest on Yammer.
Surveys are one-way communication, whereas when you do this kind of challenge in a forum like Yammer, it becomes multi-directional and people can contribute to that idea.
Having that ability has really made us more of an innovative company, which is really going to move us forward in the industry.
Having them talk about it on a social network really engaged the competition. We ended up settling on a pretty simple winner, which was a reusable kids cup.
So it's better for the environment, it's obviously cost savings for the company, and it's a win-win all the way around.
Yammer was a terrific enhancement to that because it gave people the ability, without getting second-guessed or judged, to put ideas on the table about where we could save money without hurting the guest, without hurting the team member, and without compromising our quality.
Okay, so the reason I like this video is obviously you got a CEO and a CIO talking. For those of you that are based in the US, Red Robin is a restaurant chain that has beautiful burgers. But obviously, you can guess that this business is highly competitive, right? Especially this day and age where, back to my point, people can get an opinion of where to get their favorite dinner faster on the outside than on the inside. And if they got a bad experience with this particular chain, they're going to be very flaky and they'll change overnight. Hey, I'm going to stop going there. The idea here is, again, a lot of people say, oh, what's the ROI? What's the return on investment of social? And in this business or in manufacturing, we know there's a lot of talent that are not sitting in PCs. We got folks either in the assembly line or driving a heavy-duty equipment. In this case, the knowledge in this business is captured with waiters and waitresses serving beautiful burgers. And what the CEO had noticed is Christoph would serve a beautiful cheeseburger to Andrew, get his tip. When he's done with his shift, Christoph goes home because he's earned his money and he doesn't want to share feedback. But Christoph, every day, he can see if Andrew is grumpy. Hey, is there enough bacon on this one? How about their reusable Kit Kat? You're laughing, but that's a true story. And if Christoph can only voice his feedback to Andrew or to the headquarters, that mothership that's coming up with whatever the next burger or the reusable cup, at the end of the day, remember what I was telling you, it accrues to innovation. It accrues to securing that customer so that Andrew's got a reusable Kit Kat for his kids, and Andrew's got enough bacon on his bacon cheeseburger. So again, that's why it's a great video that, it's not a pure ROI per se, but you can say that CEO put $1,000 and suddenly you get ROI directly by tapping the entire network and not just the inner circle of folks that are sitting in the same office next headquarters. And you'll see there's like many stories around that topic, and I've put the links later on in the decks of companies that are using our different use case for Yammer. Okay, moving on with the slides. The idea here is, obviously, we all have different problems we're trying to solve in our organizations. And slowly, potentially, the problems we're trying to solve are going to maybe grow into projects and initiatives. And that's what you're seeing here. And potentially, some of those things are going to start to overlap. Additionally, maybe we're a network of vendors around a different or a specific industry, or just companies collaborating. But think of the blue circles, potentially companies that are collaborating, and you see you get green circles that touch multiple companies. The idea is potentially to bring a product to market, I'm going to need a supplier to help me build one part of the whole product that I'm going to be shipping. So the idea is, how do you collaborate on the outside with your favorite suppliers, your favorite, customer advocates, or your best customers out there, so you can get feedback early on. The other point, before I show you how you can do that, is you've got intellectual property that should never leave your kitchen. That's this analogy here. You get the hometown team, and you get, your practices around your tactics. But, when you're going to have a game, you're going to invite a team to play on your own field. And this is the idea of what we call, like the clicker's running out of battery, what we call internal and external networks. So think of an internal network, what I was showing you for Contoso. So another way for those that are IT here in the room thinks of anyone who's part of my Active Directory. Anyone in my organization would be in my home network. And like I say, you get different groups. And then potentially, I'm going to need, and then think of Northwind, another, not necessarily competitors, but suppliers, someone I partner with to either bring a product to market, in this case, that does press on media, etc. So there's a very elegant mechanism so you can collaborate on the ad side from both angles. Either me, I invite someone from the Northwind to participate in some activities, or more importantly, it could also be Northwind inviting me to participate in some activities. So before I jump into the demo, another way to think about it is, how do you break the boundaries of space and time? Like Andrew mentioned, we know there's this day and age, we're not in front of a beautiful PC all the time. We might be traveling. We might have a smaller screen factor or a medium screen factor, whether it's a smartphone or a tablet. We know we might have folks that are maybe that don't even have a PC. We know we got folks that maybe are a younger generation that don't necessarily communicate via email. We know we got folks, again, sitting in different headquarters. So how do we break those boundaries, and how is Yammer helping us do that? So let me show you a little bit of demos. Okay, so we're back into our network. And remember I was telling you Yammer is this very elegant way to communicate and collaborate on the ad side. And the way it works is you can see here at the bottom, I got this notion of networks. So again, think of a network as a community of interest or a clear objective on the ad side. Personally, if I was showing you my Microsoft network, I belong to about 20 networks. Some of those networks, for instance, for the SharePoint conference, we got an external network. We got an external network for our influencers. I got an external network with all our analysts and press specialists that I collaborate on the ad side with to do press release and stuff like that. I got an external network where I directly collaborate with customers on the ad side. For this demo, we only have two, and we've created one called TDF External. So suddenly, I'm leaving my Contoso bubble, and I'm in this kind of middle ground between my personal network and collaborators on the ad side. Folks on the ad side that can join this network could be anyone. It could be someone with a Hotmail address. It could be at Northwind, whatever. I can control who comes in this environment to participate. Again, it can be very hush-hush, or it could just be open and everyone can invite their friends and family. So in this case, we've created, let's say, again, back to the story, a TDF External. Let's say we do need suppliers to collaborate on this particular new bike frame we're working on. So in this case, there's Andrew. And you can see here, let me do this slowly. You got to watch this picture. You can see there's two Andrew. There's the Andrew that's part of my company. And then there's one with a very interesting picture, Andrew Z. Please review budget ask by end of week. So I can do that. Same thing. I can put that on the entire network, or I can scope that discussion to a specific group. In this case, I'm just going to post it. And voila, Andrew is going to get the notifications, and I'll get back to what are the different forms of notification. But very easily, I can collaborate on the ad side without doing any extra work. Creating an external network takes a couple seconds. It's the same mechanism as creating a group that I was showing you earlier. So the next thing, so I've mentioned Andrew. The other thing around breaking barriers is, remember I was telling you, especially as you collaborate on the ad side or on the ad side, not everyone might have the same native English or native language that you have. And in this case, it looks like Andrew is pretty fluent in some exotic language, and Yammer has this out-of-the-box capabilities to translate things on the fly. And so you can see automatically it detects that, hey, my preference in this case is English, and this is definitely not English. And on the fly, I can definitely translate something. I'm preparing to bet blah, blah, blah World Cup. So we're talking about soccer. So I can reply in French. You know, I can say oui, 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 whatever. And Andrew, because I'm replying in French, he's going to get the same button, right? So the idea, again, is, and it's very amazing to see this playing at our large customers, whether it's folks like us and Microsoft, or actually real customers on the outside, where, again, it's another way of enabling people, even though it's not their native language, but to give their 2 cents. You know, here's what I think about this project. Here's my PMO best practice, and let me tell you in my favorite language, not being constrained by one language that's the standard at our organizations. So that's what we mean with this translate capabilities. And as you would expect, yes, you get also a mobile experience. So I'm going to switch to my mobile device. So here I got a Windows phone, but we get mobile. There's a Yammer app for obviously Android on iOS, whether it's an iPad or iPhone. So in this case, you know, here I'm just going to start the app, and I get different things like you would expect on the app. You know, I can post something new, and you know, let's attach a slide from the keynote. You know, let's just say, and I can mention Andrew. Here we go. Here's Andrew Z. Enjoy. It looks like it's still thinking, uploading the picture, and voila. So again, remember that notion that I was telling you, it should be very easy to start, very easy to engage. And if Andrew is typing, hopefully I'll get his reply in a couple seconds. But the idea is I don't need to be in front of my favorite browser to participate in conversation. If I need to leave early, or if I'm in traveling, or if I don't have a PC period, I can participate in those conversations. Obviously, a different form factor than a full, beautiful screen, but you know, I never miss a beat on that particular device. It looks like there's a little latency. Okay, we'll just move on. But anyway, I get what you would expect in a mobile app. I get notifications, and you can control how much notifications you get. So that's the mobile angle. And then the last thing I wanted to show on this topic, here's the picture we've uploaded, is yes, I can go back to my network as easily as here on the left-hand side. And the last thing I wanted to show, and back to the point earlier from the gentleman, is, you know, obviously there's a huge search capabilities because you're indexing a lot of valuable conversation. You're grabbing different objects. So in this case, I type project, and you can see there's different artifacts with that word, whether it's a note, whether it's a group, whether it's a files. If I type, let's try opportunity. So you can see here, for another demo, I was connecting that to our CRM sales automation. So you can see here I'm indexing opportunities, which are, again, think of an object, a system of record coming from another system, but there's a conversation happening in Yammer regarding, let's say, those different opportunities that we have. Okay, let me switch back to slides. And let's talk about the last section. As I mentioned, you know, one of the beauty of a network is very easy to identify top performers, and you can as easily as liking a post, or like I mentioned, there's actually a praise mechanism. So this morning I loved the demo, and I thought Heather and Mike did an awesome job, so I did a praise on the internal network. Again, it's this very low friction way of recognizing talent within your organizations. But wait, there's more. Actually, this idea is kind of the theory behind it, is obviously think of the dots as different set of individuals. Think of the green dot as a project manager. Let's say I got a team of 4, and I've got another project. I got resources working across different, or cross-sharing resources across different initiatives and so forth. And potentially, the 2 orange dots are maybe high-performing individuals because either they're putting a lot of skin in the games, answering questions, doing great deliverables, getting a lot of praises for our peers. So, you know, how do we surface some of those into Yammer? So I'll show you a couple, a glimpse of some of the things we do out of the box. So one of the success, again, of Yammer is the ability to give you insights. in terms of how vibrant is this community. So here I'm going to the analytics applications. And for those of you, this is only in the Yammer Enterprise, but here I can get messages and activities on how vibrant the system is, my network is. Obviously, this is terribly boring since we don't have a lot of activities in this demo environment, but you can only imagine how interesting the reporting is when you get hundreds and thousands of individuals collaborating. I can look at trends over time. What are the top messages? Are people collaborating on the open versus collaborating privately? What are the groups that are trending? What's happening? How are people accessing Yammer? And that's all the information you're getting out of the box. Now, obviously, there's a lot more. You can get at who are the top contributors. You can look at trending topics. That's what those are. And to make this a little more fun, you can, and because we're running out of time, I'll show you how you can even go a step further with some of the third-party app. And in this case, I'll show you one that's free that one of our Microsoft employees developed called Yammosphere. And what this does is automatically looks at all the connections you've got, not just with individuals, but topics, and it puts this notion of a graph of your organizations. So let me log in here. And voila. So here, again, not terribly exciting, but think of the nodes as different individuals, and it shows me the connections. So ideally, in a highly connected organization, all those end nodes like that Dennis should be connected himself to more and more people. So maybe I need to have a chat with him, maybe give him some training. And you can see some people are more connected than others. You want to get a glimpse of what it would look like at a Microsoft network, and this is my personal graph in the Microsoft network. So you can imagine potentially use this to get more insights, and specifically individuals are, hey, maybe there's some folks that are highly connected that I need to connect with. So again, it's the richer representations to help you discover additional insights on how vibrant your network is. Now, time is running out, so we got a couple slides to wrap up. And I apologize for speeding up. So
all
back
right,
to you, Andrew.
awesome. So we got 3 minutes to cover this, so we'll do it briefly. The good news is there's actually a number of other social sessions, and we will be blogging a lot of this content. So when you go back to that question of what do you need to become in order to use a collaborative tool, the answer should pretty much be obvious. You need to be a collaborative culture. How does one become a collaborative culture? Well, I will attempt to explain in the next minute. So we will see how to do that. And again, collaborative cultures exist wherever there's shared goals, which would be the organizational level, project level, team level, et cetera. So how do we achieve this? Here, we'll just kind of gloss through all this stuff. There. All right. One, we already talked about this, having clear goals, but not necessarily defining the roles. And this is where Project Server comes in, because what does Project Server do very well? It helps communicate organizational goals. It helps make portfolio priorities clear. In fact, that was one of the discussions at the PMO Symposium a couple months ago, was that the PMO is really playing a cultural role of communicating priorities to the team. In addition to that, being honest and candid, I know we talked about having an open culture where I could question things. I think the Red Robin video we talked about. But that being honest and being consistent. If I say I want collaboration, that means I need to accept collaboration whether or not I like it. All right. Embracing your intrinsic motivation. That's really what drives Yammer, is employees wanting to solve their problems, right? The theory why. And then moving on, practicing something called positive deviance. There's actually books on positive deviation. The concept is to find people, the nodes in your network, like what Christoph was just showing, who are actually very successful at collaborating and encouraging that. But the trick there is to identify who is actually doing a great job. Put all that together, and you've got social, or you got collaboration.
We got plenty of assets. We got plenty of links, but this is the cookbook from 8 million customers, 200,000 organizations using this to date.
Perfect. And there's also plenty of additional reading. We included a list of authors. Feel free to go out and find any of their books. They talk about a lot of this stuff. There's blogs, list of resources, and there's some additional presentations. I would call out Dux's presentation tomorrow on change management. I think is going to be great. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, with that, apologize for speeding up at the end. Again, you get our contact information. We'll be hanging around after the sessions and later on tonight. So thank you for your time, fill in your eval, and have a great conference.